Hey, it's Tina Lorraine, your certified abundant mindset coach and your ghostwriter guru. And today I want to talk about, again, telling your stories, but I want to talk about one of the reasons why we feel we can't get to the point where we can share our story with someone else to help them out so they won't have to go through the same thing that you did. And one of the big reasons I see in clients a lot is the feeling of shame. And I totally understand it. But shame is not something that God wants you to feel because of something that happened to you, or maybe even choices you've made, or, the way you've lived your life up until a certain point. We carry the shame of it. I used to wake up every day feeling shame, and I didn't even know that's what I felt. I felt shame for the abuse that happened to me. I felt shame for the decisions I made when I was in a mindset that was, I had low self-esteem. I had no self-confidence because I had been sexually abused so much that I just thought it was normal, really. I used to date men that were predators. I didn't know they were predators, of course, but a lot of times when you've been a victim of sexual abuse, you tend to attract those that are going to do more damage to you. And I know that makes no sense, but because you're toxic, you're going to attract more toxicity. It's the same way as if you're unhealed in dating. It's the same thing. For some reason, whether the predator was in a suit, whether the predator had money, whether the predator had, when I say predator, I don't necessarily mean somebody walking around in the alley at night and waiting to pounce. But what I mean is, I was dating this guy who was a hedge fund manager. He had his own business. He lived in this lofty apartment downtown, and I never went to it, but according to him, this is where he lived. And he had a lot of money. He was very flashy about the money. He thought that if he talked about the things that he could buy me, that I would just be like, yeah, okay, I want to date you. I want to be in a relationship with you. Well, needless to say, that was never, when I was in my toxic dating cycle, I was never impressed by that. You can't lead with money and things and gifts and all that with me. I've always kind of been like, I like a sense of humor. I like someone who's interesting to talk to. Matter of fact, this guy even had an MBA from Kellogg. I mean, one of the top master's business schools in the country. It's part of Northwestern. And I was just bored. And I was just like, oh my goodness. But the reason why I told you that is because he was just interested in my physical appearance. He said he was a leg man, and I have athletic looking legs, and I've always had like big legs. And he saw me walking down the street, and he stopped traffic, y'all. He stopped traffic to talk to me and made everybody wait as he was talking to me. So he was a charmer. He was used to getting everything, women that he wanted. He had some high profile women in his life. And he just didn't understand that I wasn't that type of chick, that I wasn't impressed by stuff or muscles. He just really wasn't my type physically. I mean, but to everyone else, he was like very, very handsome. He also did fitness modeling. He had all the muscles and stuff. But that was another thing that I've never really been attracted to, is all these bulging muscles. But for some reason, I think I was just bored in my life at the time. So I was just like, I'll give him a shot, He did stop traffic for me, so I'll give him a shot. But he just wanted to use me for my body. And that's all he really wanted. Yeah, he tried to talk a good game about, getting to know me, but his conversation really was around all the celebs he's been around and my physical looks and the women he's dated and all this. And it was just very boring to me. And so I said that to say that my past had me feeling a lot of shame and guilt, even though the initial acts of sexual abuse were done to me, but then the decisions I made out of a mindset of shame and guilt and low self-esteem and no confidence in myself and just feeling like I had no voice and that I was invisible, the decisions that I made after the fact for years made me feel shameful and guilty. And a lot of times when we have stories that we're actually healed from, like I am healed, from all of that and constantly healing. It's always an ongoing journey. But a lot of times we feel like we can't help anybody else because we want to keep the secret. We want to hide it in our heart and we feel like we're moving on with our lives. But then we get stuck in areas and maybe we're not prospering in areas. Maybe we're feeling like we're stuck and that we just don't know how to get out of it. But it all ties back to shame and guilt, but you're not really necessarily making the connections. And I had to make those connections because I was always living in survival mode because I was used to being victimized. I was always very, very protective, overprotective of my kids. Because again, I've been victimized starting from when I was younger. So I knew, my kids weren't allowed to go spend the night at people's houses and things like that because I was like, there's predators everywhere. I was thinking, I would go to the show and this, a couple of times the guys would just sit by me and then start, relieving themselves. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And it was like I was in a spiral at the time. I was like, why are all these creeps attracted to me? But it wasn't God. It was the mindset I was in, the energy I was in, and I didn't even know it. The shame that I felt every day of my life that I didn't even know that I felt, but out of my actions, I was acting shameful. And I had to realize this. And I think one of the connections that it really hit home is God speaks to me through everything. A Disney song, a movie, a lyric, whatever. And one day I was watching this movie it was a series called Game of Thrones. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And they had this queen locked up, this religious cult had this queen locked up. And in order for her to get free of the cult, that's what I call a cult, they thought they were super righteous and super holy. Sounds like real life, right? They said she had to do penance, which her penance was they stripped her of all clothing and they made her walk through the streets while this nun, I guess she was a nun, rang this bell behind her. And as she rang the bell, she said, shame, 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 over and over and over again, and 3 times. And then she would pause, and then she'd ring it again and say, shame, shame, shame. And this woman had to walk through the streets, through the public streets, while this woman rang the bell, and people spat on her and threw food at her, and they cut off all her hair as well to make sure she felt every level of shame that she could. And it's not to say that this woman was an innocent queen. She did some murdering and all these things. She did a lot of horrible things, horrific things to people and to their families. And she really didn't care about anybody, really, but herself and her kids. But that's not the point. The point is, even though she did all these horrific things, and even though these horrific things had even happened to me in my childhood, and I made decisions based out of that, and there is a lot that made me feel shameful that I did. God is not looking and shaming and guilt tripping us. God understands that we're human. We need to understand that we're human. So when I started to heal from all of this, I had to really pay attention, and I still have to pay attention daily to my internal dialogue that would tell me that I have to feel shameful about certain things in my life, just about anything, really. And I was like, no, I'm not that person anymore. And God told us to despise shame, because God isn't shameful. God isn't shameful of making you. God isn't shameful that you were born. Your parents might have told you were a mistake or you weren't planned, but God isn't shameful. You're here because you're supposed to be here. And this is the reason why we need to get over the shame of our stories, because we have to help other people, and we can't help set others free if we're constantly feeling in this trap and in this cell of guilt and shame and feeling like we can't say anything because everything has to be kept secret. Well, let me tell you something. You are alive. You had to go through what you went through to help somebody else, and that's the way you have to look at it. I went through, sometimes I look at my life, y'all, and I'm like, why in the world? It's a miracle that I am a sane person. It's a miracle that I'm a loving and kind person, that I've always been a sweet person. I don't even know how God has kept me through a lot of the things that I've been through. But I know that I am here to help people. And when I look at it that way, I'm not trying to trick myself into not feeling shame, because I work daily not to feel shame. And to despise shame, you really have to put some energy into despising shame, because evil will have you despise shame. Will have you feeling horribly about yourself, horribly about your choices, horribly about your decisions. Yes, you are where you are because of the choices you have made. But if you are healing, and you choose to heal every day, and you choose to choose God, choose love, choose yourself, choose joy, choose peace daily, you have nothing to be ashamed of. And even if you have a bad day, even if you choose to have a bad day of guilt trip and eat a bunch of food that you're not supposed to eat and be depressed, you still have nothing to feel ashamed of. You just get up and you keep going, and you keep taking your steps, and you share your story with those you're meant to share it with. Because if you're called to help people, and that's what we're called to do as coaches, consultants, if you're a new coach or consultant, or if you're just a person going to work every day, or you're on the cheerleader team, or you're just driving, you're carpooling people, and there's somebody that's hurting that's next to you, then that love inside of you is not going to let that person hurt if you know you have the answer and the solution to their problem. Even if you haven't fully come out of your problem, maybe you haven't totally healed from it, the fact that someone else is going through it can help someone else. You never know, or the burden you feel, the burden that the other person is carrying, and how much you're lifting that burden just by sharing your story or even listening to theirs. Maybe you can't relate to their story, but maybe you can be an ear to listen to, and maybe you have a solution. So never count yourself out, never count your story out, and never feel the shame of the decisions you've made out of a victim's mindset, or just being human, or just, having things that were done to you that were out of your control. It's your story. It's part of your story. It's not a part of your identity, not the godly identity. Never blame God, and never blame yourself for things that have happened to you, but utilize it. You want to help someone else not fall and stumble. You want to help someone else ease their burden. You want somebody to feel carefree and light. If you've gotten on the other side of something, then share it. Share it. And sign up for class June 10th, Telling Your Story, Savvy Storytelling for Social Media, for new coaches and consultants who are struggling with aligning their story to their business, struggling with figuring out who their ideal client is, struggling with feeling shy about telling their story or public speaking online. This class is for you, because on the other side of shame and guilt is freedom. And we're called to set the captives free. And if you're called to set the captives free, whether you're a coach or consultant, whether you're just somebody going to work, it doesn't matter. We're all called to set somebody free. We don't want people walking around oppressed, because if one person is free, there's still a lot of people that are oppressed, and we're here to help and we're here to serve. So if you want to know what your purpose is, that is something you can always utilize, is your story. So I'll be seeing you guys soon. Sign up for class. The link is in my bio. I love you guys and take care. Bye bye.